Okay, now it's my pleasure to introduce the next panel, starting off with Commissioner Toshiko Grace Hasegawa, who's the Commissioner of the Port of Seattle. You can give her a round of applause. Dr. Sesha Moon, the Director of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion at the U.S. House of Representatives. Gautam Raghavan, the Assistant to the President and Director of the White House Office of Presidential Personnel. And then finally, Will Reese, who's the Director of the Senate Diversity Initiative in the Democratic Leadership Office of Senator Chuck Schumer. Okay. Well, thank you for all being here. I'm just going to ask each of them to introduce themselves and just give a little bit of background about what your organization is doing, particularly to address the issue of diversity in government. So, Commissioner?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Toshiko Hasegawa. I am a Port of Seattle Commissioner. I was elected in 2021, making me the first Asian American woman and only the 5th woman ever to hold that office in the Port's over 110-year history. I mentioned elected office specifically because there's so many barriers preventing women of color from contemplating a run. The Port of Seattle is unique in that, unlike other ports, it is an elected office, and despite its name, it's actually a county-wide jurisdiction with a population greater than 16 American states. So those barriers to public office might look like, thank you so much. It might look like trying to strike a work-life balance. It might look like an ability to fundraise, or it might look like just not really understanding the way the electoral process works. The other hat that I wear is I am also Executive Director of Washington State's Commission on Asian Pacific American Affairs. It's an appointed position. I was appointed by Governor Jay Inslee in 2018, making me the youngest woman of color to serve in the governor's cabinet. And that was truly been such an honor to serve during a time of tremendous need during the global pandemic and the subsequent recovery effort. And so, I think that elected leaders everywhere are now channeling and leveraging the advocacy from our community pain and our resiliency to resource both pro-equity and anti-racist programming through the establishment of offices. For example, at the state, our first ever, and it's the first of its kind statewide Office of Equity, and at the Port of Seattle, its Office of Equity as well.
Thank you so much. Dr. Moon?
Hello, my name is Dr. Sisha Joy Moon, and my preferred pronouns are she, her, hers. And if there's anybody either watching on playback or in the room that identifies as visually impaired, I'm a Black woman. I have black straight hair. I am wearing black and white glasses and a black suit. And thank you so much for inviting our office to be here today. So a little bit about the Office of Diversity and Inclusion within the U.S. House of Representatives. We are a nonpartisan, non-legislative support office, and we are really here to help employing offices create and cultivate a congressional workforce that is reflective of the American people. I say nonpartisan and non-legislative because in our position, we do not think that ensuring that we have a workforce that is representative and qualified is a partisan issue. It is not red or blue. We want to make sure that we're capturing the American experience for every shade in between. In support of that mission, we offer 5 service offerings. We have candidate services, and that is really designed to connect candidates to careers in Congress and really demystifying what it means to work on Capitol Hill, not only in DC, but then also across geographic districts. We do member services, and that's really designed to help hiring managers not just come to us for resumes, but to ensure that there's a strategic human capital infrastructure in place within offices, and that can be a member office, a district office, a leadership office, a committee office, as well as the 3,000 other positions that are within support offices that can help someone move up from, let's say, an executive assistant to a chief of staff one day. We also offer research and data analytics, which is where we take a mixed method approach to understanding the state of representation across the workforce. The 4th is professional development, and then the 5th is programming. And so that's a little bit about our office. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Dr. Moon. Gotham?
Hey folks, thanks for having me today. So I run what's called the White House Office of Presidential Personnel. The federal workforce is huge. In the executive branch, we have millions of people who work there, but we only have about 4,000 political appointees who make up the sort of senior leadership and their support staff across every cabinet agency, department, and other agencies. You know, my sort of path here is I've been in DC for about 18 years, I think this year, and worked in campaigns, worked in the Obama administration for 5.5 years, worked on the Hill briefly. And the thing that I've learned through that process is that any president, any executive, their success depends on the people around them, the team that they build. And so much of our ability to accomplish things during the Obama-Biden administration was really due to the people who were in the room, their experiences, their voices, their narratives. And so coming into this administration, I knew that was the work I wanted to be focused on, was building this team around the president to help him be successful. We were incredibly lucky that from the very beginning, from the campaign and in the transition, President Biden said, go and build me an administration that looks like America, that really reflects the talent and diversity of our communities, and we've been able to do that. I'm obviously very biased, but I think we have the most talented and diverse administration in history. The diverse part I can prove. Talented is a belief that I believe strongly. But when you think about it, we have an administration that for the first time, our political appointees are majority people of color, 57% women. Roughly 1 in 3 are naturalized citizens like me or kids of immigrants. 1 in 6 first-generation college students. 14% identify as APAICS, which is amazing. So we are well represented in the ranks of this administration, including in the cabinet, where we currently have, including the vice president, 3 API women, soon to be 4th once we get Julie Su confirmed as Secretary of Labor. So the results, I think, speak for themselves, not just the picture, but the work that these people are doing every single day. And I'm happy to talk more about that, too.
Thank you so much. Will?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Will Reese. I work with the Senate Diversity Initiative. My work is very similar to the work of Dr. Moon's. I actually started on the Hill, I started as an intern 20 years ago this year. And so I've been able to see, just how people have moved up, and that's basically what I help candidates do, help candidates get onto the Hill, but also help those who are on the Hill move into other positions in other offices. There's a programming component in our office as well as a data component. But what I really focus on is diversifying the interview pool in Senate offices. It can be very challenging work because people move around, and this year, last year was very tough because everybody went to the Biden administration, and so exactly. So it's been really challenging, but it can also be very rewarding as well.
Thank you so very much. I think I may have neglected to tell you the title of this panel, but it's Diversity in Government from Congressional Staff to Political Appointing Elected Officials. And we really are blessed to have all these people here because not only are you an appointed, you're also an elected, and then people at the highest levels really doing the work to make sure that the places of power are diverse and there are diverse voices. But I'm interested in, what are some of the obstacles that have impacted your work to achieve diversity, and what are ways your organization is working to address those challenges? So Gotham, I'm going to jump to you first.
Yeah. Well, look, I think when you set out to do the work that many of us are doing to build inclusive, reflective, diverse teams, first of all, I don't think the challenge is that the talent doesn't exist, right? So whenever someone says, oh, I can't find you talented people, I'm like, you're just not working hard enough to find people. But that is really the biggest obstacle for us, is just the amount of work that it takes to be intentional and proactive and really go out and find people, especially folks from communities like ours where we haven't always been represented. There's not necessarily a history of role models you can look to or examples you can point to and say, I can do that job. That is really, for us, the biggest challenge is simply just a recruitment challenge of getting out there where we don't have nearly enough people to go out to every community, every part of the country and say, hey, have you thought about how your experience as a community organizer, as a local official, as an academic, as a lawyer, could be leveraged into service in the administration? Because it can, and we see examples of that all the time, and I think fortunately now with that 14% I mentioned, we have more examples for the next administration, but that is always going to be our biggest challenge, is really getting folks who don't think they can do this work or have never been asked to say, yeah, I want to do it too.
Thank you. Commissioner?
Well, the interns of today are tomorrow's session aides, are the next day's legislators, are the next year's executives. And so the conversation about what a pipeline looks like is really front and centered for us from an institutional perspective. Having that point of entry from non-traditional candidates is really important, and understanding where the holes in the pipeline might be is equally important. So that means when an internship doesn't necessarily lead to a paid position, that's a gap that we need to be aware of and intentionally work to address that gap. One of the challenges is that there's no guidebook, right? So we're standing up these amazing programs, these offices. Many of them are first of their kind, and there's really not something that's tried and true for your specific jurisdiction. It has to be tailored to the needs of the people. I think there are lessons learned that we can apply, but getting the buy-in is another huge challenge. Getting the buy-in internally from agencies and departments on what this transformation looks like internally for them, getting the buy-in from your legislators and your officials, right? Because the Office of Equity at the Port of Seattle has been around for years, but is just now starting to put the pedal to the metal on some of these big programs, because before it did not have a supportive commission. And these offices are not a place where you just put problems and they magically come out solved. This is work that has to happen intentionally over the course of time in all places. Equity is not a dollar amount, it is not a strategy, it is a lens that you apply to literally everything that you do. So it's not just a structural transformation, it's a cultural transformation. The challenge is not just recruiting talent, the challenge is retaining talent through a supportive and lucrative work environment. And the last thing that I'll say is the resources. The resources are a tremendous challenge. What is equity spend? Where is the need? How much are we currently allocating? And where do you get the funds? Because like all good things, when you do it right, the work gets bigger.
Thank you. Dr. Moon?
So I'm going to say a couple of things. You know, I, too, am an appointee. I was originally appointed by Speaker Emerita Pelosi, and now I serve at the pleasure of Speaker McCarthy. So I think one of the things was helping people understand that this, again, is a nonpartisan issue. Congress is better if it reflects the people in which it is mandated to represent. So I think that's one. I think the second is I went to a strategic retreat last week for a congressional office, and I make it clear that our office's approach to inclusion is not through a lens of exclusion. We want for everyone to see themselves in our work. I identify as a Black queer woman, but I want for a straight, white, middle-aged man from Iowa to see himself in the work. And so someone said, well, what are the dimensions of representation as you see them? And I started naming off an entire list. I said, well, it can be age, it can be race, it can be ethnicity, it can be broadband access, it can be divergent thoughts. It could also just be returning citizens, and it can also be other, because I think it's important to allow space for people to be able to define their own dimension of representation. So I think having a clear understanding of the work, a lot of, you kind of hit on this, commissioners, a lot of this work is new in certain spaces, and I think getting experts in the space that really understand and can connect with multiple different communities is really important. A lot of people do not know that the federal government is the largest employer in the country. I think panels like this are important. You know, I've been able to grow a relationship with Gotham, and will, because we understand that we have to be in community with one another in order to really move the needle. And I think Gotham also hit on something important. You know, anytime I hear someone say I can't find them, my first question is, where did you go? Right. And so it won't just be the college career fair. To just like solve your problems. Are you being intentional? Are you working with organizations such as these? Are you working with NISHA, with the Congressional Asian Pacific Caucus? Are you also going to like more innovative activations where, you know, maybe AAPI people are? Are you going to festivals where you can actually find hard to reach, hard to fill positions for pipelines? And so I think getting a little bit innovative is important, but I also think that resources and where it is positioned within the organization also says a lot about the organizational commitment. And then I'd say the last challenge is really making sure that we are connected to the districts. I think sometimes when people think about Capitol Hill, they think of it as like a geographic location, and sometimes the communities kind of get lost in that shuffle. And so as an office, we've been more intentional about saying Congress rather than Capitol Hill, because we want for the person in Seattle to see themselves in our office and to know that there are opportunities for you as well. And so I think there's a particular need to maybe reframe so that we better connect and bring Congress to communities.
Thank you. Will?
I think specifically in the Senate, one of the big issues that we've always had is that offices are looking for candidates who've already worked on the Hill in some capacity. And so when I'm meeting with candidates who haven't worked on the Hill, they always share the challenge of, kind of being taken seriously by an office that really would rather hire someone from the House side or from the Senate side that is interested. So that's one of the biggest challenges. I think money has been a big challenge over the past couple of years, especially. I know when I started on the Hill, well, it's never really been a place where people go to make money. But there is a huge difference, in salary when it comes to Capitol Hill versus the federal agencies. And then, of course, the private sector pays even more. And so that's been a huge challenge on the Hill that I've seen over the years. It stops a lot of people from actually applying. And that goes for a lot of diverse candidates as well. And so those are two big challenges I've seen. Besides what I mentioned earlier about everybody wanting to leave for the administration over the past couple of years, those are probably three big challenges. Yeah.
Thank you. So the next question is, what does the future look like for diversity in government, and what are some of the opportunities that our community can be excited about? So, Commissioner.
I think this is a really exciting opportunity to envision what the future could look like. And let me just say it looks like a woman of color for president. Yeah. That's the future I want to see. She's melanated, right? She's maternal. The future of government, equity in government, looks like good paying family wage jobs with benefits. It's no longer, a sacrifice to serve your country. It is sustainable for you to have a family and for you to be a whole person, because exactly what this world needs more of are people who are connected to their community members, who are connected to the pain, because it's the people connected to the pain that have to be closest to the policy. And it looks like a robust public engagement process that looks like not only having a mechanism in place to push information out to the community members at large so that the initiatives at the top are making it to the ground, that you're working not just through your grass tops, but it's also those grass tops are helping it make it to its grassroots. So the federal initiatives are making it to the mom who really needs that benefit. But it's also taking that wisdom and that feedback with humility from the community members, understanding what their needs are, so that we could be not just more representative of, but more in service to what the present day needs of the people are. So having that ebb and flow for an authentic public engagement mechanism is critical to effective government.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Will?
I'm sorry, repeat that question.
Oh, sorry. It's, what does the future look like for diversity in government, and what are the opportunities our community can be excited about? For example, will the Senate start paying people more?
You know what, that question makes me think about, because I used to work on the House side.
Yeah.
And once the House changed in 2018, I saw a big change, not just in the sense of the members that were elected, but the staff that they hired. And that was really encouraging to me, because it wasn't like that when I was on the House side. And so that makes me think of the future, and it makes me think of a Senate that looks much more diverse as well, because I think that we're going to, elect more diverse senators. And I think that has been the biggest change that the House and the Senate have seen. Once you actually elect diverse senators, their hiring practices are totally different. And so that's what I'm looking forward to.
Thank you so much. Dr. Moon?
So a couple of things. every Congress since the 112th has broken the previous session's record for being the most representative body. And this year is no different when you look at Black, AAPI, Hispanic members, as well as, we have LGBTQ. In this particular session, we have the first Gen Z to be in the House. And so I'm incredibly excited about that, and I'm also incredibly excited that we have some senior leaders in place that also reflect the membership composition. So you have Anisha, who, as I said, does Congressional API caucus. You have James Min, who is the Chief of Staff within Speaker McCarthy's member office. You have Sonali, who's the ED for the Democratic caucus. You have Mo Sharma, who is the Director of Member Services for Leader Jeffries. And so you have some people in key positions. And so I'm excited about that because it's also making sure that people that are representative of the national landscape are in all levels of the organization. We're very committed to that. And so, one, that just excites me. But what excites me also is just the level of effectiveness of my team. Some of my team is here. I'd like to thank you guys for coming. And I'm really big on stats. This team was established in 2020, and since that time, our office has helped over 2,600 candidates. And after receiving candidate services from our office, over 720 job seekers have landed positions. So we are effective. And I think that's important to say because one of the things that we just launched, and I hope that you all do connect with our office, diversity.house.gov, is when we look at those silos, one of the things that we recognized was that people are only finding out about career opportunities if you went to the right school, if you landed on the right listserv or a text message thread. And so we recognize that if we want to put the people in the people's house, which is our slogan as an office, we have to meet the American people where they are. And so we launched the House LinkedIn Recruiter Pilot Program. It is now a space where we actively promote positions that are available within the congressional landscape. We just launched in January for the 118th Congress. We've already received 3,675 applications, have already had hires, and when looking at the demographic dispersion of applicants, 43% identifies people of color. So we are reaching people. And so just, again, trying to find innovative ways to bring Congress to communities is something that we're actively excited about. Also, my team is hiring. If anyone's looking for a gig, we're looking for a LinkedIn recruiter, program manager, 2 talent management specialists, as well as a research and data manager.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moon. As a House person many, many years ago, I wish her office was in existence because it did, who I knew, right? Gotham?
So I think there's 2 things I'm excited about. One is I think we're beginning to be in a place, I don't think we're quite there yet, but we're at this inflection point where at least in this administration, I see senior leaders thinking about diversity not as a thing they have to do, either because of the optics or the political pressure, but as a thing that they want to do, and that is actually smart for them to do. Right. I mean, we all know this already, but I feel like we're beginning to see that it's just easier for us to do our job, right? We don't get pushback on diversifying slates of candidates. We don't get any sort of questions about why do you want to do this? The underlying philosophy seems a little bit more baked in than it did certainly 10 years ago, and that's exciting for me. The other thing that I'm excited to see in the future is more of this sort of cross-pollination of public servants doing time at the federal level, then going back to their communities, like running for office, running organizations, and then coming back into federal government. I will tell you, I think the most effective operatives, the most effective public servants are people who have done it from multiple different perspectives, right? They've done time on the Hill. They've worked in their communities. They've sort of worked in the private sector. They've worked in advocacy. I think having that skill set of understanding sort of the inside-outside game, how do you take the lessons learned from communities and bring them to Washington and vice versa is very powerful. And I want to see more of that happening.
Great. Okay, this is the last question, so I'm priming you to get ready for your questions. So I'm going to ask you a question, but if you want to talk about something else, it's fine too. But what advice would you give to the audience around getting involved in public service? What are things people should keep in mind to be competitive in these roles? And like I said, if you want to add anything else, that would be great. Okay, I'll start off. Gotham, I actually. You
wanna start with me?
Yeah,
Great.
You were on the list.
I have a lot of advice. Okay, unsolicited. Well, it is solicited. So a couple of things. One is, I think if you're early in your career, take a risk if you can and do public service, work in the government. The scale of what we can do in the federal government is unparalleled. You can't match it in the private sector, in philanthropy, nowhere. Like no other entity touches as many people and changes lives in the way that it does, that we are able to do in the federal government. So if you can take a risk and try something new, come and do that. Again, I would echo my previous point of sort of working in different places to sort of understand how it all fits together. And then I have some very specific tactical advice. One is sometimes it is worth picking a job for the boss, not for the job. If you can find a supervisor who will really invest in you, give you opportunities, trust you to grow, I think that's incredibly important. Also, pay your taxes. I'm not kidding. Like, everyone should be paying their taxes, especially if you're interested in a senior job in an administration. You'd be surprised how many people don't pay their taxes, so pay them. Third, be very careful what you put on social media. Again, not kidding. We look at everything that people tweet, what they put on Instagram. We look at your Venmo transaction history. So I know a lot of you are all of a sudden getting really freaked out about what you put in your Venmo transaction history. But seriously, we're in a landscape where all these things matter to future employers, and they're going to look at these things. And it's part of our vetting process. So be careful what you put on social media. And the last and perhaps most important fundamental thing is be a good person. Like, be nice, be kind and respectful to your colleagues. Especially in Washington, this is such an industry town in so many ways. And your reputation, even from your earliest days, as an intern, as a staff assistant, that follows you throughout your life. And so I would strongly encourage you to live by the values you would want in your colleagues too.
I think that's good advice for people who want to be in private or public service, so thank you. Will?
I want to mention the importance of internships. If you are, entry level and trying to actually get into this work, an internship is a great way to work somewhere for just a short period of time, but to gain, invaluable experience. And it's not just the internship, sometimes it's a fellowship. I meet with a lot of candidates who already have careers, but they really want to work on the Hill. And one of the pieces of advice I give them is to look into fellowship programs, because those are great ways to end up in a Senate office, end up in a House office, and basically do the work that you really want to do, but the work that will stand out for your next employer on the Hill. They'll see that you have basically been in LA for a member, just as a fellow, and you'll be able to gain, really valuable experience that way.
Thank you. Well, and of course, we know APAICS has a very robust internship and fellowship program. Dr. Moon?
I'm echoing everything my colleagues said, especially that internship and fellowship. Almost every senior leader that I've met started off as an intern, including myself. So don't shy away from it. Agreed with Gotham about relationships matter. You hear that all the time. But now that I'm in this role, I really understand. Relationships are everything. Also, the core values. My team will tell you one of the first exercises that we did as a team, the second that I was appointed, was establish core values. As much as I love quantitative and qualitative benchmarks as performance indicators, my team is assessed on whether or not you held true to the core values that we have established. Because how you're moving out in spaces is a reflection of our office and our mission. So I take core values very seriously. This one is recent. So I went to an event recently, and maybe you guys know this because I came from executive branch, and so I'm new to legislative branch. Someone sent me a screenshot, and I was in Politico Playbook, and it said spotted. And I was like, what is that? Spotted. Someone is always watching you. When you talk about social media, it's not just the social media that you curate, but it's also people that are curating your brand for you. And apparently it's when people go out and they go to, known events, and if you're seen. And so you can get lost on Capitol Hill. There are receptions every night. There's alcohol, there's food, there's access. Make sure that when you're in these spaces that you're moving responsibly, especially if you are the intern that's young. Because I do not want for anybody's brand to be tarnished at such a young age. And so just always make sure that even if you are going to a party, that you're always partying with a purpose. And that one was a reminder to me this past week when I recognized I was spotted in a room that I didn't even know that people knew I was in. Yeah.
That's some really great advice. Commissioner?
That's why I love panels, is because I always learn something. I'm not trying to get spotted. So we talked a little bit about the points of entry, but I want to talk to you about how to be able to grow once you are in the pipeline. And so looking for those leadership opportunities is really important, whether it's at the federal, state, county, or municipal level. There are official committees, boards, and commissions which you could apply and be appointed. These commissions and committees are a wonderful opportunity to demonstrate subject matter expertise. It's a wonderful opportunity to make connections. And it's a wonderful way for you to be able to build your resume when you're looking to apply for the next thing or run for the next thing. It was a really important opportunity for me to be appointed by Governor Inslee in 2016 to the Washington State Deadly Force Task Force, which led to our revolutionary police accountability initiative. And that's also how Governor Inslee became familiar with my leadership. So I am a case study for how a commission or a committee can be a wonderful building block for you. Continuing to attend some of these external leadership opportunities, whether it's a candidate training or APAICS, continue to engage, again, not just for the skills that you'll be building, but for the connections that you'll be making. You know, my dad told me a really sound piece of advice, and it was fill your toolbox, because a lot of the best opportunities you actually can't plan for. The opportunity will present itself, but you need to be equipped with the skills that you need to rise to the occasion. My next piece of advice is when you find yourself in the system, right, you're gonna experience, I think, what raise your hand if you've heard the term imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is where you feel like you don't belong even though you're there. And we find ourselves adapting habits to conform to that space, but you remember that your job is not to conform, it's to take up space, because that's exactly what transformative government is. So find your mentor that can provide you sound advice, and find your safe space on your floor so that on those rough days you have somewhere to go to. And the last thing that I'm gonna say is, as you succeed, as you lead and climb, you leave a vacancy behind you. Don't just look forward, you look backwards, and you think of who is next in the pipeline to serve after you, because it's not just about the me, it's about the we, and that holistic way of approaching leadership is what's going to make a transformative change.
And can I say one quick thing?
Yes, go ahead, Dr. Moon.
Also know the difference between a mentor, a coach, and a champion. Those are three very distinct roles, and sometimes people think that your mentor is supposed to be the person to help you lift, and that's actually not their role. And so make sure you have all three of those in your professional and personal life.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we have probably time for a few questions. Oh, the person with the microphone, I think Mr. Garcia has a question.
I just wanted to add one thing that was not mentioned, is that not to burn bridges. Having been working on the Hill since '89 and being in the opposite ends of the political spectrum with my Shiro, Irene Bueno, we ended up being in the same position 30 some odd years later in support of a particular candidate for president. So even though we were on both ends, never, ever, ever burn your bridges when you're here in DC. Everybody knows who you are, and like you all said, they'll follow you to the very end. I do have a question for Gautam in particular. Having applied for a government position, agency position, one of the most frustrating website was usjobs.gov. And that's where you apply to not get a job, I guess is basically what it boils down to. I know there's been some efforts to reform the system. One of the most frustrating aspects of that is that they advertise jobs that are limited to in-house people that you're not even eligible to apply for, even though it's advertised out in the open. There are no follow-ups. I mean, it's just basically where your resume goes to die in some cases. And so, even though people are trying to find us as members of the Asian American community to apply for these jobs, when we find you, it's just not there. And I was just wondering whether or not that website in particular has been reformed to make it more streamlined, much easier to apply, understand, and actually focus on the position that you're trying to apply for.
Yeah, so I'm not trying to duck the question, but that's actually not us. Let me just explain the context. So USA Jobs is the portal to apply to career civil service positions in the administration, which is the vast majority of positions in all the agencies and departments. My husband's a career civil servant at State Department, so 12 years ago, I heard all about it. He went through the whole USA Jobs process, and it is both an antiquated system and a feels like a bit of a black box, like what happens next and how does the cert list work and all this happen. I don't actually know what the latest is on reforming it, but I'm happy to talk to our colleague Kiran Ahuja, who runs the Office of Personnel Management, also an API woman, who previously ran the White House initiative on APIs in the Obama administration. So I want to take it back to her and try to find out what they're up to. The one piece of advice I would give, though, and this is what worked best for my husband, was to find someone who had successfully navigated that system and get their advice on even as simple as what keywords do you put in your resume, so that the algorithms pick you out. Just get a good sense of what is it the kind of situation where they already have someone in mind internally, or is it really an open process? That's the best advice I have, but I understand and have heard this frustration many times before.
Still waiting for my internship.
Our website, however, if you go to whitehouse.gov and scroll to the bottom, and if you go to join us and fill out our application, it goes directly in our database. It's a completely different system. So if you're interested in serving, that's where you should go.
And it's at the whitehouse.gov.
Hello, thank you. My name is Caitlin. I'm with the George Washington University Asian American Student Association. I just want to thank you all for all of your remarks. I found it really useful for my knowledge, and I'm personally very interested in interning on the Hill. I had intended to do so during the pandemic, but I'm actually from Texas, and my congressman is Colin Allred. I tried to apply. The applications got canceled. And I guess I also wanted to mention that my family and my friends, I've gone to the Allen Outlet Mall where the shooting has been, so that's really hit home for me. So I suppose I'm really appreciative of all the discourse we've had about that today. But frankly, I'm definitely more interested in asking the whole panel about advice on landing an internship with the Hill, Congress, the Senate, and especially since some of us students have had a little pandemic gap in our resume, if that has anything to do with, I guess so to say, prospects of landing any internships. And I suppose if we have any time at the end, it would be lovely to hear what are y'all's motivations for serving in your current positions.
That will be our last question. Who wants to start off?
So that actually makes me think about my own internship experience, because when I first applied as an intern, many years ago, I was waitlisted, partly because I applied to a senator who was very popular, and I also applied for a summer internship, which is very difficult. It's very competitive during the summer. My advice to you would be to apply directly, but then to reach out to one of us, and we can actually flag your application for an office, and we can kind of see if there are other offices that you may want to consider as well.
So a couple of things. First of all, I hate to say thoughts are with you and your community, but I really do mean that. I'm so sorry for what happened in your home state. I think, one, connect with me and my team when this is over. We have a resume review workshop on May 22nd where we can give you hands-on advice on how to get your resume in front of a member office. And, hearing you say where resumes go to die, I'm taking that back to leadership. I just want for you to understand that. That is so well put, because I think that is an experience that a lot of people feel, and not just with USA Jobs, but even when they put stuff into our resume banks. That's very important feedback. And to answer your last question, what is motivating? We had an activation at a music festival last week, and I looked at someone just like you. It was a room full of HBCU students, and they were artists and creatives. And I was like, there are positions for you in Congress. And they were like, what are you talking about? I want to be Beyonce. What are you talking about? And I said, well, you do understand that the committees develop the legislation on live performances, copyright laws, ticketing systems, artificial intelligence, artist protections. You do understand that we have House Creative Services, which has graphic design positions, videography positions, photography positions, or even though it intersects with Congress, you have Library of Congress, which has a music division where you can be a curator for the National Music Registry. And to see people's eyes open up about the world of opportunities available for me is what personally drives me to do this work. This is the people's house, you belong in it, and creating space where you can take up space is my personal mission and motivation. So please find us when this is over.
Well, I do not work on the Hill, so I'm going to leave that to the experts, but I'll say my motivation in public service always turns back to my family. It's my daughter at home, and I think of the world that I want to see for her and everybody else's children. It's the possibility of what could be, because I know that we have not only the expertise and the resources, but we do have the political will to do what must be done to carve a better future. And that's what drives me.
Thank you so much.
And I just add, we have paid internships too at the White House, so you should apply.
Yeah.
And some of the agencies are beginning to offer them as well. So the State Department now has a paid internship program, and many of the other agencies have internship programs. I don't know if they're all quite paid yet, but they're following the lead that our colleagues on the Hill set. And just for my motivation, we have a slogan in our office that people are policy, because we really do believe that when we get people who reflect the rich diversity and talent of American people, we get outcomes that are good for all of us. So that's what keeps us going.
Thank you so much for all of you for being here and taking the time to provide your advice, background, experience, and we just are so thrilled you could be here, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much to our panel. If they can just move down to the stage to take a photo. And I'm also just going to plug APAICS one more time, because we do have a paid internship in Congress, as well as a fellowship program. So our programs team is here with Nick and Mackenzie, so they're happy to answer anyone's questions about that. We're getting ready to go into break, so if you check on your guidebook app, you can find the rooms where those breakouts are happening, or ask any of the APAICS team members outside the door. Thanks so much and enjoy your break.